I'm back and I'm ready to scorch the earth. I rewatched the Hobbit movies, hoping my rage had cooled. Spoiler alert, it hasn't. Welcome to the Hobbit. Let's milk this cash cow, or the Hobbit. Why make one movie when you can stretch it to 3? I was like Smaug, snoozing on a pile of dirty laundry, when this cinematic mess woke me up and cranked my nerd rage to full blast. Here's the deal. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Not Silmarillion crazy, but I've got the DVDs, the games, and the action figures. So when Peter Jackson took on The Hobbit, I was stoked. This is the guy who made Hobbits and Dwarves awesome. It was supposed to be 2 movies, manageable, right? But then it turned into 3, because Hollywood always goes for the cash grab. I rewatched the whole trilogy, and it felt like hiking through Mirkwood with a boulder tied to my ankle. By the end I was ready to erupt, so here I am with my inner Smaug about to go nuclear. This is the nerd version of a dragon attacking Lake Town, and you're right in the blast zone. Get ready, because I'm about to roast these movies like they're overcooked Lembas bread. The film, alright? How am I going to talk about The Hobbit 3? Well, we're going to watch the whole thing. So let's watch this thing. I never thought I'd get mad at a movie for just starting, but I guess anything is possible. The problem is that the Battle of the Five Armies just starts. We see the logos, then the Hobbit title, and then there's a fade in, and boom, the movie just begins. No context, no build-up, no prologue. In Return of the King, we saw Gollum's transformation. In the Desolation of Smaug, we had Gandalf and Thorin chatting or whatever. But Bofa has nothing. I know they split the book into 3 movies and likely hadn't filmed a scene for it, and doing pickups would have cost $1 gazillion, but they couldn't even try. No history of dragons, no scene with Bilbo as a kid, maybe hinting at his future adventures. Remember when Gandalf said, "I remember a young hobbit who used to go into the woods looking for elves"? We couldn't see some of that? Or maybe a scene showing Bilbo's dream of hunting dragons? Nope. This movie isn't really about Bilbo. So the movie just begins with the Master of Lake Town, a character given a much bigger role than in the book, evacuating the city. And Thranduil, who wasn't even in the book, is also evacuating, along with Bard's children, who, surprise, also weren't in the book, birds of a not-in-the-book feather, I guess. Smaug starts destroying the town in some sweet shots. I'm not so hardened that I won't admit when something is cool or good, even if I would have preferred if Esgaroth was a model. Meanwhile, the Lake Town Master and his version of Grimmer Wormtongue, an added character for no good reason, are fleeing through Lake Town on a boat while the city burns with terrible CGI fire. Bard, the book's hero who kills Smaug, was in jail or some other nonsense, but he breaks out to face the dragon. There's a quick moment with Balin and the dwarves looking all sad. It's boring. Oh, and here's Bilbo, yay, 6 minutes into the film. Remember how after each LOTR opening scene, we saw Frodo within 10 seconds? Just saying. Back to Esgaroth, where Bard is standing on a bell tower high above the CGI fire-ridden city, aiming at the dragon. His children, on a boat with Thranduil, see him and are like, "Oh no, Dad." His son, Bane, decides to help his dad, because gender roles in movies, I guess. While his 2 sisters remain on the boat, calling for him to come back. Smaug is still shooting fire everywhere, and Bard runs out of arrows. Bane arrives with the black arrow, their last shot, and Smaug tears down the tower, nearly sending Bane to his CGI death. Smaug stops burning things to talk smack, which is cool. His trash talk in Erebor is some of the best. Bard's bow is broken, but he makes do by using a piece of wood to brace the large black arrow on his son's shoulder. The scene that follows is actually kind of cool. Bard pulls the arrow while his son faces him, not the dragon, with Smaug looming ever closer. It's tense, and the music is solid. The arrow flies true, hits Smaug's weak spot, and the dragon crashes to the ground, dying dramatically. It's kind of odd that a film's main villain dies in the first part of the third movie, but whatever. This is why Peter Jackson cut Saruman from the Return of the King theatrical version, but whatever. So the dragon is dead, the dwarves and Bilbo are relieved, and the film moves on to Dol Guldur, where Gandalf has been caged as part of some subplot that doesn't belong in this movie. Galadriel shows up and communicates with him telepathically, letting him know he's not alone. Okay, at least this scene doesn't last long. We cut back to the morning on the borders of Lake Town, where everyone is freaking out, including Alfred, the pseudo-Wormtongue character. Thranduil is walking around and finds Keely, the dwarf she fell for in the last movie, in like 5 seconds. He says some dumb love platitudes and then declares his love in Elvish, even though they barely know each other. Legolas, the jealous elf boyfriend, shows up, and I'm wondering why this is even in the movie. This is an adaptation of The Hobbit, not some YA dystopian romance. Keely gives Tauriel some token or other, she smiles, and Legolas looks jealous. This scene makes me want to gouge my eyes out. Now, if you look at this scene with some creative imagination, you could see potential. If Keely and Tauriel had just talked about their paths diverging without all the love talk, that would have been much more powerful. That's why Éowyn's crush on Aragorn in Lothar was so heartbreaking. She never came out and said it. She just hovered around with pained expressions. It's called subtext. Instead, we get a straight-up love triangle, and it just doesn't belong here. Okay, let's move on. Alfred is annoying some woman for a blanket, and it leads to a scuffle. Bard steps in to stop him, reminding everyone not to turn on their own people. Then Bard's son trips Alfred, which feels juvenile. This movie is really testing my patience. Where is Bilbo? Bard is reunited with his family and people start calling him King Bard and Dragon Slayer, trying to make him their leader. Alfred calls Bard Dragon Slayer and King Bard and tries to elevate his status. When Bard refuses, people turn on Alfred for being a greedy jerk. Before they can mob him, Bard steps in and tells everyone to help each other instead of fighting. This whole scene is just filler, adding unnecessary tension. Bard should have just suggested they all go to Dale for safety, with Alfred hanging around as the outcast. Finally, the separated dwarves make it to Erebor, and Bilbo emerges after 19 minutes without a proper scene. It's refreshing to see Martin Freeman again. His presence almost makes me forget the chaotic mess this movie has been so far. He informs the dwarves that Thorin has a case of dragon sickness and is acting erratically. They find Thorin being all Scrooge McDuck with the treasure, and then everyone hugs and gets sentimental for a bit. Soon after, Thorin is hunting for the Arkenstone, and Bilbo secretly has it. There's some dramatic irony there at least. Now, back to Dol Guldur, where Gandalf is still in a cage. Gallad grumble grumble. Hey, there's some Lake Town theme music playing all sad as the lake people walk around Dale. That's great, I love leitmotifs and I think there should be more of them in movies. Alfred and Bard see that the dwarves survived, and I can't help but wonder why Alfred is even in this movie. At the ruined entrance of Erebor, Thorin, who's acting like a jerk, orders everyone to seal the gate. When someone, maybe Keely, tries to reason with him by pointing out that the lake people have lost everything, Thorin's like, screw them. Now, I understand that Thorin has the dragon sickness at this point, so it's understandable that he's acting this way, but it seems like a good time to discuss why Thorin's character confuses me so much. I'm aware that his turn towards being a jerk is in the book, but it feels inconsistent. Throughout all 3 of these movies, Thorin is a confusing character. When he first meets Bilbo, he thinks the Hobbit is useless. Fine, but then Bilbo saves them from the trolls, and Thorin seems to respect him a little. When they lose Bilbo, Thorin assumes he's gone back home, but when Bilbo comes back and proves his commitment, Thorin suddenly changes his tune, even hugging him. In the second movie, Thorin is back to treating Bilbo like a nuisance, and then he starts being nice again when Bilbo makes a good plan with the barrels. But when Bilbo enters the caves, Thorin threatens to kill him. What is this? Does Thorin like Bilbo or not? Why does he go back and forth so much? It's like he has a split personality. How many times can you make a character flip-flop before the audience starts getting frustrated? It's like Thorin is a terrible professor or a distant father who never gives approval, no matter what Bilbo does. How are we supposed to root for Thorin if he's always so inconsistent? Thorin's unpredictability makes him hard to like. He's supposed to be the Aragorn of these movies, right? The leader who we're supposed to admire, but he's not. I mean, look at Gimli and Legolas in The Lord of the Rings. At first they don't get along, but by the end of the first film they're buddies. In the second movie they're practically brothers. That's how you develop character relationships. With Thorin there's no consistency. It's like if at the start of The Empire Strikes Back Han Solo acted like he didn't know Luke at all. We'd all be confused because we thought they were friends. Back to the movie. Thorin is paranoid and has dragon sickness. He tells Bilbo that one of the other dwarves has taken the Arkenstone, then switches mid-sentence from saying he's grateful to outright telling Bilbo that the treasure doesn't belong to the people of Lake Town. It's like he's echoing Smaug's words about greed, and I guess we're supposed to worry about him. But honestly, I don't care. I don't care about him because he's been a jerk throughout all these movies. Jumping to a different scene, we get more computer-generated imagery, CGI, like Thorin's cousin Dane. Why is he CGI? Was it because Billy Connolly couldn't be there in person? If the filmmakers wanted his voice, they could have just used a different actor with Connolly's voice. It's weird because the Lord of the Rings movies used real people for many of their scenes, and it looked fantastic. Now, everything's CGI, and it's not the same. The elves are CGI, the dwarves are CGI, even the backgrounds are CGI. Where's the artistry that made the original trilogy so magical? Now let's talk about gender roles in the Hobbit movies. Tauriel is a badass female character added to diversify a story that was originally a sausage fest. I can accept that, it's a good change, but then the filmmakers shoehorn her into a love story. Can't we have a strong female character who doesn't fall into a typical romance trope? Tauriel was supposed to be a powerful elf warrior, but instead they gave her a love triangle. It's disappointing because Evangeline Lilly agreed to play the role only if there was no love triangle, yet that's exactly what she ended up with. Why couldn't they just let her be a strong warrior without the romantic drama? Regarding Bard's daughters, this was another missed opportunity to portray strong female characters. Instead, they scream and hide while Bard's son fights the orcs. How insulting! Bard's daughters could have been written as brave and capable, but they weren't. Even when the orcs attack Dale, it's the brother who does all the fighting while the sisters just scream. Why couldn't they make them equally courageous and capable of defending themselves? Overall, the pacing of these movies is off, and there are too many scenes that are repetitive or pointless. The Hobbit trilogy could have been a lot shorter and the story would have been better for it. This trilogy has a lot of filler, and it's disappointing because it takes away from what made the original Lord of the Rings movies great. Well-developed characters, epic storytelling, and an emotional journey. Instead, the Hobbit trilogy feels more like a string of disconnected scenes and recycled CGI fights. It's not engaging, and it lacks the heart that made the Lord of the Rings a classic. Ah, help! We need someone to save us. Granted, the youngest daughter might be too little to wield a blade, but even the helpless Merry and Pippin threw rocks at some Uruk-hai, and Bilbo throws rocks at orcs later in this very same movie. The Ewoks killed some stormtroopers. Couldn't there have been a scene where the oldest daughter and the younger one helped their brother fight some orcs? Or where the oldest daughter, being the oldest, sought to protect her younger siblings by picking up a sword? Did the daughters not use swords and show strength because there was no love triangle for them? So annoying. Which brings me to the third point. Dead women as a sympathy device. It only happens twice in these movies, but that's 2 times too many. The first is when Balin says to Bard, I bet your wife is pretty, and Bard responds, aye, she was. Poor Bard. The second is when Legolas's mother dies at Gundabad or something, which makes him all mopey. Now, I'm not insensitive, the loss of a spouse or parent is tragic, but the only reason these dead women are mentioned is to evoke sympathy or to understand the motivations of male characters. Want us to feel bad for a male character? Give him a dead wife. Want us to sympathise with an elf? Give him a dead mother. Did they even consider anything else to make us care? It seems that using dead women as a plot device is so automatic that it makes you wonder if they even thought about other ways to engage the audience emotionally. Why couldn't Bard have a wife who survives the harsh winters of Esgaroth and is strong in her own right? And Legolas is already at odds with his father and involved in that dumb love triangle. Why did he need a dead mother to make us feel for him? It's so cliche, it's frustrating. Moving on, the battle scenes are now more montage-like, accompanied by Howard Shore's slow emotional music. Thranduil's CGI moose dies, good, less CGI is better, as does Dane's CGI pig, thank goodness. Then we see CGI Dane fighting, and it looks like a video game cutscene. Remember those World of Warcraft cutscenes? Yeah, it looks like that. When the battle looks bleakest, we return to Thorin, who is being persuaded by Dwalin to fight. Thorin is still being stubborn due to his D-sickness, and Dwalin calls him out. Thorin eventually has an epiphany, throws aside his crown, and might be a decent character until the end of the movie, or maybe he'll kill Bilbo, who knows, with Thorin. Back to the battle. Bombur blows a big horn to announce Thorin's return. We finally see Bilbo again after what feels like forever, and then there's more fighting. In the Great Hall where the women are gathered, a woman finally steps up to rally the women to fight alongside the men. This is awesome, a woman doing something. They try to get an older woman to fight, but it turns out it's Alfred dressed up as a woman for comedic effect. They ridicule him for not wanting to fight, and he might feel bad about it, but then he sees a pot full of gold, and we cut away. Back on the field, Thorin and Dane are fighting CGI orcs. There's a terrible CGI moment where two characters hug, which looks completely fake. Why couldn't they just use real actors for this? Why is everything CGI, even basic interactions? Thorin then gets on a CGI ram and charges towards Azog's post with a few others. And I'm wondering, when was the last time Bilbo actually did something in this movie? Up on the mountain, Legolas and Tauriel return from Gundabad. Legolas tells Gandalf that another army is coming from the north, where Thorin and the others are fighting. They need to go help them. Back on the mountain, the group splits up, because why not drag this out even longer? And then they fight some more CGI goblins. Sigh. In Dale, King Thranduil says a lot of his elves have died and he wants to withdraw from the battle. Bilbo volunteers to go help, and Martin Freeman is great in this scene. Tauriel confronts Thranduil and he reacts coldly. Tauriel points an arrow at him, but he cuts her bow in half and says she knows nothing of love, whatever. Eventually, Legolas agrees to go with Tauriel to the mountain to help. Meanwhile, Alfred, still dressed as a woman, is running away with his pile of gold. A troll nearly kills him, but Bard saves him. Person saved at the last minute, #1. Alfred then talks to Bard about how he should take up the title of Master of Lake Town. When Bard says he did it for his family, Alfred just runs away and we never see him again. What a lame conclusion to his story. Back to Bilbo, who reaches the mountain where Thorin is to tell him about the incoming army. The drums sound and Azog the Defiler has Fili. Fili is killed, which drives Kili to charge towards the computer orc, but he's already fighting Thorin. The Gundabad orcs arrive, and Bilbo nearly gets his head cut off, but Dwalin comes to help. Person saved at the last second, #2. The score swells, and then there are some flying Gundabad bats, and then there's more fighting. Lots of it. In one scene, Thorin is fighting and he's about to be struck by a computer orc's axe, but then Legolas throws a sword into the orc's chest, someone being saved at the last second, #3. Meanwhile, Azog gets his heavy weapon stuck under the ice, seemingly defeated, but of course he comes back, leading to another unnecessary fight. In the end, both Azog and Thorin die. The whole scene is drawn out and it doesn't even feel impactful anymore. Thorin's death speech seems heartfelt, but do we even really know if he likes Bilbo at this point? It's all well acted, but at this point I'm over it. Finally, the eagles show up and I groan when I see Radagast among them. Even when Azog dies, there's no sense of closure, it's just relief that it's all over. The ending tries to wrap things up with Toriel mourning over Kili, Thranduil having a heartfelt moment with Legolas, and some nods to the original trilogy. However, it all feels like filler and lacks the emotional depth of the original films. By this point, I'm ready for it to end. Afterthoughts. Sorry for the long and tedious rant, but it needed to be said. The Lord of the Rings was a masterful trilogy, full of captivating effects, compelling acting, and genuine storytelling. However, the Hobbit trilogy seemed to lack focus, relied heavily on CGI, and dragged the story out unnecessarily. The studio's decision to turn 2 movies into 3 was clearly driven by profit, resulting in a bloated and lackluster final product. Thanks for sticking around for my epic rant. If you made it through to the end, you deserve a medal for patience and endurance. And if you happen to be a fan of The Hobbit, well, let's just agree to disagree. Cheers. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Until next time, peace out.